Hello and welcome to the fourth video in the MB Sports video training series covering the online forms feature. In today's feature, we're going to be looking at working with submission data. So how to send your submissions via email to people who need to see the responses to the form. We're going to look at viewing the submission data online and how to modify a submission if you need to, and how that might trigger or re-trigger email notifications. For the online forms, with payment, we're going to look at how you can check the payment status for your forms. We're going to show how to filter and export your submission data to Excel. And then lastly, we'll cover off how to delete submissions either individually or in bulk. So we're back in our demo site using the volunteer application form that we had set up previously. And I've added the notification emails to go to my inbox when this form is submitted. Now this would be useful if I happen to be the volunteer coordinator for this association. So I may or may not have access to the back end of the website, and I am interested to see who has volunteered to sign up for the volunteer events. So I'm going to check off a couple events that I can help out at. And maybe in the other comments I'll put evenings preferred. Submit this. So the email has now arrived, and this is again is me receiving a copy of the submission as somebody who's been set up to receive those submissions. So in addition, if I had filled out the email address of the form as the person submitting it, and that email address was an auto reply, then I, as the person submitting it, would get a copy as well. In either case, the email that gets sent out looks pretty much the same. So it says where it comes from, and then the name of the form is in the subject line. So if you're using Outlook, you can filter your incoming messages to auto filter those form submissions to a particular inbox. And the form data is included in the body of the form. So it has the name, the address, everything that I filled in when I submitted the form is sent to the person via email. Now, in addition, there is a link to the confirmation page. Now, this is actually kind of useful for the forms which might have online payments enabled, because when somebody fills in the form, they then will be taken to a page that has a button on it, and that button says click here to go pay. Now, if they don't do that, then they would need to do that later, and to get back to that same button, they can just click on this link to go to that submissions page. And if it had payment, then there'd be a button that would say go ahead and click here to pay. Now, if they had already paid, the button would be disabled, so they cannot pay twice. And in addition, what's really nice is if it's some sort of registration form where the player perhaps is the one that fills in the form and says I want to participate in that program, they can then forward this email to their parents or their uncle or grandpa or whoever else and say, hey, can you please pay for this for me? So that's the email notification side of things. Now, the emails are a secondary option. The forms are always stored in the database. So if we're looking at the submissions online, this section that we do that is by going to Reports, Online Form Responses, and then you'll choose your form. So in this case, we're looking at the volunteer application form. So here we have a couple of submissions that we've submitted just through the course of recording these videos. And in here, I have a few options. I can hover over any of these forms and reopen that form. And then I, as a administrator, can make changes if I need to. So if this person only submitted their first name and you'd rather have their full name in there, then we can make those changes as necessary. Now, as it says at the top, due to the nature of the forms themselves, and they could be used for any purpose, including evaluation type forms, we want to make sure that if anything's changing on the form that was submitted by the person who submitted the form, if you've changed that and they filled in the email address and it was whatever filled out the form in the first place triggered a notification, changing the form will re-trigger that notification to go back to the original person who submitted it, just so they get a copy If you've changed it, they're aware of it, and they're okay with it. Now, as it says here, there is an exception to that rule. If you have hidden fields on your form, so that was one of the things that you can set up when you're creating your form, was a hidden question type, and you could use that for keeping track of administrative only information. If you change a hidden question type, then that will not send an email notification, because to the person who submitted it, they have no idea that anything actually changed on the form. It would only be if something that they had filled in actually changed. So we can save that. The other option that's on here is to print it. So if we want to print off the forms, a print version of it is just made available. Just click the print on the browser, and that will print off a fairly well formatted version of the form. And then when we're looking at this form submissions page, we have the option to change what information we're looking at. So it asks you what columns you want to show when you're looking at the data. So right now we're looking at, this is a small form, so we're looking at all the non-tracking columns. But if I wanted to show the date and the IP address of the form, so you can check all the columns and refresh, and that will then show me all those columns. So if you have 30 or 40 questions that you've been asking people on the form, and you want to highlight 10 of them for doing some analysis on those submissions, and then you can change which columns show by choosing that option. You can also limit the responses by date range. So if you want to see everything after a certain day that's been submitted, or before another day, or both. Or we can look at submissions after a certain ID. So if you know that ID number 24780 was the last one you looked at, then you can say, I want to look at everything after that one, and it would then refresh that list to show me all those forms, or all those submissions. Sorry. You can change how many show up on the page. So by default, we limit it to 25 for in the interest of keeping things quick. But you can change the limit to show as many as you want, or all of them. And then the last option in this toolbar here is to export this data to Excel. Now technically this does put a CSV file which can be opened in Excel, but also any other program that is capable of opening CSV files. So once it's in Excel, you can run any kind of reports that you want on it. Depending on the types of questions that you asked, like for example, this events you can help with was a multiple select option, so it gives you a comma separated list of all the options that they checked off. Now in addition, when you're looking at the form responses, you can use these filters to try to find specific responses that match whatever criteria you're trying to find out. Now in particular, one of the things that you might want to check for if your form has online payments enabled is whether or not they've fulfilled the transaction by completing or clicking the button and filling out the payment form. So the filters allow you to say, well, I want to see all of the questions where the PayPal transaction ID, and this information is added for you automatically once the form has a online payment set up. So the PayPal transaction ID, where it contains nothing, if I were to update that, this would show me a list of all the people who have no transaction ID, which means they did not pay. Now if I change this back to select a question where I'm not filtering anymore, then we can see that these have transaction IDs in them, and that's why they show up. If we want to see anybody that's paid cash, so this particular form, the administrator has gone in and updated this to indicate that they have actually paid, then I can say, well, I want to see all of the PayPal transaction IDs which contain the word cash. Update that, and then would give me a list of all of the submissions that have that note. Now in addition, this particular association said if they did not pay, then they actually wrote in not paid, and so if I want to see not, then it gives me all the people who did not pay. So all those options are available when filtering, and this can be for anything. So if I want to see all of the players with a birth date of 2001, then that would give me a list of all the players of that birth year. So in addition, the filters tell you how many total submissions there are in the system, how many of these are based on the filters that we've selected, and how many it's showing. Now, what's also nice is once we've applied a filter, if we click this export button, it also limits the data that's exported to what you filtered to. So instead of exporting 637 submissions, it will only export 73. So if you're going to take this data and import it into the site for something else, in this case it's a rep tryout pass. So if the association is using or is using the tryout list feature of the site, then you probably want to export this list out of your form data and then import it into your tryout list data. So you want to do that generally by birth here. So this would be a quick way to do that. So the last thing that we'll show is how to delete forms, or submissions, sorry. So if you're looking at the list of submissions, then you can hover over any of them and a trash can icon appears. It'll ask you, are you sure? And in addition to that, the site's going to automatically email anybody set up to receive submissions on the form, as well as all administrators prior to deleting. Now the reason it does that, again, is because we don't know what this form is. It could be a evaluation form of some kind. And it could also be the case where the person who is being evaluated happens to have access, or it happens to be a site administrator. And if they were to receive a negative evaluation and were trying to delete it to cover the tracks, then this would help prevent that situation from occurring. So it says it's going to do that. We hit OK, and it then would delete that submission and email all of the administrators of the site that that form has been deleted. Now, if the form has been done for a while and you want to just delete the entire form, including all the responses, then you can do that by going to the Advanced Features, Online Forms, View List, Add New. So as we hover over a form, if a trash can icon appears, that means we can go ahead and delete it. Now, the rules that we've put in place, again, are very sensitive to the fact that these could be evaluation type forms, and we want to make sure that nobody's trying to cover their tracks by having poor evaluations deleted. So the rules are that the form itself must have an end date. The end date must be more than a few months ago. There cannot be any submissions within the last few months, and the form cannot have been updated in the last few months. So all those, what that basically means is people cannot tamper with the results. They would have to ensure that there was an end date set up in the form initially, that they haven't changed it in a while, and once all those conditions have been met, then they would be able to go ahead and delete the form. So this travel permit request, even though it's quite old, there's 3 responses in it. It doesn't have an end date, so I can't delete it in bulk. I can go ahead and choose an end date now. So if I selected what the end date was, we can say even the end date was October of 2014, so a while ago. It still won't let me delete it because I just updated it. Now, after a few months have gone by, I would then be able to come back here and delete this form, including all the responses. And at that time, it will not trigger any email notifications to anybody. It will just go ahead and delete the form and delete all the responses.